Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started here. One moment.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's featured presentation titled Ensuring Compliance for Your IVD's Performance Evaluation. Our featured speaker today will be Manuel Martin, and I will get into his background in just a moment here. So moving along here, just a brief overview of our agenda. I'll be offering an introduction to Celegence and our services. And then we'll move into IVDs, the history and regulation timeline, key changes to the IVDR from the IVDD, then moving into the key compliance elements of the IVDR, then moving on to the performance evaluation report, and then finally the industry overview and opportunities, and as well as a chance for you to ask your questions to Manuel in a Q&A session following this presentation. Now, I'd just like to provide a brief overview of Celegence. We were actually started in 2017 in the area of regulatory affairs for pharmaceuticals, medical devices, as well as IVDs. And today we serve some of the leading global life science companies, as you can see here on your right-hand side, including Novartis, Bausch Health, Johnson & Johnson, amongst others as well. Now moving along here, as you can see, we have a global presence. We're headquartered in Chicago, Illinois, but we also have offices in London and Bangalore, India, where most of our operational work is delivered. But we also have partner offices located in China, Japan, and Brazil as well. Jumping ahead here, here's an overview of all of our coverage and service offerings, from regulatory consulting and submissions to publishing and compliance to regulatory writing and labeling, as well as gap analysis and consulting in the medical device and IVD space as well. I also wanted to mention here about Celegence's new IVDR and MDR CAPTIS technology that specializes in literature search reviews as well as document management for all of your CERs and PERs. So I would encourage you to reach out to me, and my email will be up on the screen towards the end of the presentation, so feel free to reach out for more information on our CAPTIS technology. So moving along here. Yes, here I would just like to introduce our featured presenter for the day, Manuel Martin. He is a senior IVD and device regulatory consultant here at Celegence. He has over 23 years of experience in device lifecycle management and quality management systems for a variety of industry regulations. He has experience in quality and regulatory from a notified body background with strengths in people motivation, coaching, and mentoring for multicultural teams, with over 20 years of experience in global IVD, medical device, pharmaceutical, and in the biomedical sectors as well. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Manuel.
Hello, everyone. I'm Manuel Martin. I will be navigating and sharing with you on this journey about the IVD devices, the industry itself, and the changes across different regulations within Europe. Initially, we will talk up with a small introduction about what IVD concept is as per the new regulation, as well what are the key changes and compliance aspects associated to this industry, associated to the manufacturers, to the developers, researchers, and to the submission itself. Therefore, these devices to be able to be marketed within different countries within Europe. As an initial point, including the IVD concept, the history and the regulation timelines, I would like to emphasize the scope of an IVD. Previously, as per concept where the IVD background and the medical device itself, the scope of activities were kind of mixed. For that purpose, since 2017, the new regulation for IVDs in Europe, IVDR, established a key definition for IVDs for in vitro diagnostic devices, including specifically device which might be a reagent, a calculator, a material, an instrument, a piece of equipment, a software itself, a system, even a component, which will be used alone or in combination of a diagnosis of a disease or other conditions of human health, including the determination of the state of health and whether to make further conclusions on how to cure, mitigate, treat, or prevent this disease. It is important to understand that the IVD goes specifically and focus within any physiological or pathological, congenital, or any predisposition for any medical condition or a disease. Obviously, this includes any safety and compatibility with potential recipients, which means any patient, any human being that it might be treated accordingly as per an IVD to either diagnose or predict any illness or disease. It will be categorized as well within the IVD environment. We're coming on to the next slide, and we have provided some IVD examples for you. As you can see, we have different test kits, including test strips, saliva test strips or nasal test strips, pregnancy tests, for example, malaria, hepatitis test kits, blood glucose meters as well, which, as you can see, they have the intended use to predict certain illnesses, certain glucose levels, or any other kind of illness or disease that through these devices we can actually diagnose. We won't get into any classification or how these devices are assessed against this new regulation, but as we will be reviewing this moving forward in a more deeper way. As a background, the Vitro Diagnostic Directive, the IVDD previous, against the new In Vitro Diagnostics Directive, the IVDR, we can see from 2017 where the European Commission decided to implement the new regulation. Several changes and key factors were modified according to the previous IVDD. We can see during that transition that since from May 2017, they provided us up to 2022, May 22, a full transition period. What that means is that all manufacturers which were registered and marketing the IVD devices under the IVDD directive have 5 years to adapt their quality management systems, to reinforce their technical files, their technical dossiers against the new regulation, meaning the IVDR. 2022, May 2022, there won't be any notified body or competent authority that issue any registration for marketing purposes under the IVDD directive. But given that these certificates may be applicable from 2022, we have another 3 years period where up to May 2024, no further IVDD certifications will be in the market. What that means is that essentially for any remaining previous certifications, IVD is a critical time for any manufacturer to move forward and get their readiness in place to be assessed against the new regulation. Coming now to the next slide, we will deal with the key changes from this previous IVDR regulation to the new IVDR. And here we have highlighted the main changes and key factors applicable to this regulation and how that is increased on the strictness, increase on requirements, and also in time. We have changes in the structure of the and administration of the regulation. Obviously, this new IVDR regulation has more clauses and more requirements to run through, more ruling, more classification and assessment conformity routes. We have also new economic operators affected by this regulation, where we make clear difference, for example, within the activities and the role of notified bodies, the role of competent authorities, meaning the European country health departments, how additional requirements are in place to demonstrate the performance and safety of the IVD itself as a device, and also how clinical studies needs to be also reinforced towards the end user. We have also key aspects like the Unique Device Identification, the UDI, and the UDAMED registration, that global database in Europe, which will be harmonizing all the IVD devices in a worldwide scope. We have additional requirements regarding the management of critical suppliers or subcontractors, whether these activities are not conducted by the legal manufacturer. We have also a conformity assessment for Class T devices. This is an advance that we provided to you. Class T is the highest risk IVD device that we can place in the market, where, for example, performance-wise, we have the need of involvement of an European representative laboratory. And this laboratory will be verifying the performance claimed by the legal manufacturer and obviously complying with common specifications, meaning the harmonized standards. I want to emphasize on the key compliance aspects of the IVDR. As a manufacturer, we need to take into account not only these changes, but how within these changes we have different elements where we need to reinforce our evidence, whether from the earliest stages of design and development up to post-device release activities, including surveillance, post-market, etc. A number of different elements are required for us to be within a legal and regulatory framework according to the European regulation. As an example, we have a new classification route, Article 47, specifically Annex 8. We established the 4 different classes of IVDs. Class A, Class B, Class C, and Class D, in that order from lower to higher risk. We have a specific obligation to manufacturers on Article 10, where we have the need to establish a European representative, whether the headquarters of our organization are not placed in Europe. We have a continuous compliance approach, which is managed through a solid quality management system, as well as solid, robust regulatory portfolio, including post-monetary activities. Once again, the device identification and registration within the UDAMED, the European database for medical devices and IVDs. And we also have specific requirements for clinical evidence and performance testing evidence, as well the involvement of notified bodies for all classes except Class A, where that no need for any sterilization or measuring activities within our IVD. We have lined out for you 6 active notified bodies, which are actually applicable, and we can retrieve them to register our IVDs in Europe, which would be BSI, TECRA, GNet, TGV, some others, like for example, very recently, about a month ago, SGS gained also the IVDR registration, so they will be able to also cooperate with manufacturers to ensure they comply on their registrations. Coming back into the key compliance elements, we would like to emphasize the conformity assessment routes. We already mentioned the different classes of IVDs, and we can see in that layout how the lower class up to the higher risk class, class A to class D, the number of requirements increase considerably. Class A, which is what we call a self-certified IVD, will require essentially European Declaration of Conformity as per Annex 3, plus another additional items, including Annex 3, which essentially involve the technical portfolio of our IVD. As soon as we step in Class B, the requirement for certified quality management system is in place. That's Annex 8 of our IVDR regulation. And then technical assessment of the documentation for each category of device, meaning that the notified body will be reviewing through a sample exercise the technical performance and clinical evidence of our IVD. As well, they will be also reviewing the robustness and the compliance of our quality management system. We can see, jumping into Class C and Class D, how we get more specific, more strict. The quality management system is still in place, Annex 8, but we have type examinations and we have different sample exercise, meaning that we will not only, the notified body will review just the generic device sample, but they will go as per device batch, device group. There will be a number of samples as per notified body criteria, ensuring all the technical aspects and all the quality management system areas are linked within each other and also complying with the regulation. As a very good example, we can see in Class C devices where we specifically go to batch verification in both routes. Once again, quality management system and also how quality is involved within the production aspects. So this is an overview on how the conformity assessment routes will be run through a notified body review of our IVD device. In this slide, we emphasize again on the sampling exercise from the notified bodies. Whether you can see the involvement only for Class A, whether we have a sterile device, or Class B, Class C, and Class D, where we run again through the assessment of the technical documentation, and we will increase the sampling exercise as per batch above up to Class D. The key compliance elements within the IVDR is managed by the rules within the regulation itself, the regulation 746/2017. We can see how blood screening, blood or tissue compatibility, infectious diseases, cancer testing, companion diagnostics, or even high-risk self-testing devices or specific IVD reagents are categorized in different classification according to these rules. This is a very important matter at the time of a legal manufacturer put the technical file together. Any errors, any missings with the assignation of the applicable rule and clause and the classification of IVD obviously will outcome on a negative feedback from the notified body, which will delay our registration process. So it's very important to understand how every rule applies to single parameters and specific devices. On the next slide, we would like to go more specifically into what we call the performance evaluation report of an IVD and what is included within the performance evaluation report and what key aspects we need to take into account. Specifically, our performance evaluation report is an analysis of data to establish the scientific validity of our device, how a device behaves, performs, and how that is linked to the clinical performance. Once our device is tested, once we have the evidence that we conducted all the test methodologies and the outcome is positive as per our expectations, how that will be applied to a clinical outcome. From a clinical perspective, we have a number of items that we need to look for. Specific standards, harmonized standards, which will be ruling this performance evaluation and also the clinical expectations as well. Analytical performance and clinical performance are two very specific parameters that need to be strictly linked within the technical file documentation. As an overview, we can see how all these activities within an IVD performance evidence and portfolio, we can start from a planning perspective and from a data collection, where within data we can see how technical performance and analytical performance of our IVD is also linked to a valid clinical association. So it will be a registered CRO approved within the European Union, the one consolidating and demonstrating that the outcome from this technical performance is actually valid to retrieve and conduct the clinical trials. From those clinical trials, the clinical performance will be outcoming and will be part of our clinical evidence at the time to demonstrate to the notified body and competent authorities that our IVD meets the intended use. Having linked that data together, analytical performance and clinical evidence, we will review, we will analyze that we actually meet the regulation itself and the harmonized standards for technical performance and clinical validity. And we will populate the technical file. We will bring all this evidence together in a technical file structure provided by the IVDR regulation. So we can see how the final outcome from this technical file is the clinical evaluation for the IVDR, including the performance evaluation itself. This slide, we just want to run you through what is the structure of a performance evaluation report. Areas like the IVD device description, how our analyte or marker or reagent, its specifications, the purpose of this IVD device, what is the intended use of our IVD, what are we trying to achieve, what kind of diagnostics, predictions, and which parameters with and the which acceptance criteria, and whether we will consider favorable or non-favorable the outcome from this IVD device. Part of the performance evaluation report is also the intended user. What type of population, what kind of population are we addressing these IVDs? Age, group, maybe the location, if this IVD will be only focused on certain countries, the user environment. Areas like risk classification, which is strictly linked to the quality management system, we will be able to demonstrate how the IVD rules itself against specifically ISO 14971, the risk management standard, how we categorize the risk, how we identify hazards, how we mitigate these risks, and whether, if there are any residual risk, how these will be measured, accepted or not. Part of the performance evaluation report is also the IVD characteristics. We discussed already about claimed performance, any contraindications, stability parameters, for example, what is the shelf life, what is the lifetime of IVD to be used efficiently, biocompatibility, whether we have any software included in this diagnosis within the IVD, either in the hardware of the IVD or either in parallel as a component of the device group itself. It is important to understand that within that evaluation report, we need to clearly establish what are the performance parameters, whether we include diagnostics about sensitivity, specificity, cross-interference with other substances, either from the human body or either from any medication or pharmaceutical ingredients that the patient or the intended user may have already in its body. As part of the performance evaluation report, it's very critical to understand that every single testing, every laboratory used needs to be approved by the European Union. There is a list of harmonized standards which rule everything since we start on the early stages of design and development of the IVD, even when we run the initial test, laboratory tests, and how this test methodology, this acceptance criteria, this exclusivity on any of the test outcomes, the approval phases, the risk mitigation needs to be ruled against the European harmonized standards list. We have other regulations on harmonized standards, which are essentially from MEDDEP, the European authority regarding to post-market surveillance and IVD device communications towards adverse events, complaints, negative feedback, how MTCG 2020 regulation as well applies, and also a very important one, the GHTF, where we actually need to rule our clinical evidence as scientific validity determination and the performance of our device within the global harmonization task force. This regulation is also very important. But this means all our activities will be tied up within a standard regulation harmonized approach. And this is what the notified body specifically is looking for. A structured, reinforced, valid approach demonstrating testing, performance, safety, and clinical requirements. In this slide, we can summarize how our performance evaluation report includes the clinical evidence, which is supported against the scientific validity from the performance and testing studies, the analytical performance, the outcome from these tests, and the clinical performance, the outcome from the clinical studies towards the intended user. We can see additional items like post-market performance report, post-market safety update report. And we can also see how different classes of IVDs have certain requirements. Class A and Class B, lower range on the risk scale. We will have a post-market performance report upon request of the competent authority or the notified body. So we will need to populate these reports accordingly. At the same time, we need to have the right infrastructure to build and proceed sharing these reports at a short notice. On the other hand, for Class C and Class D, the figure of post-market safety update report is actually in place, and we need to emit these reports once a year. What that means is that we need to, as our device will be released in the market, we need to have the right tools to retrieve feedback from the user, feedback from the market, feedback from similar devices, similar IVDs that might be in the market, which also apply to our technology, and be able to review all these data and proceed with our report whether any further actions need to be taken. As we can see again, even post-released within monitoring activities, the number of requirements increase as we go higher on the risk range of the IVD device. Within this slide, we would like to summarize and provide you an industry overview and opportunities for the legal manufacturers of IVDs and also for the market itself, for the IVD environment. We can deduct the new European IVD regulation brings more stricter rules for medical devices and IVDs. So from May 2021, May 2022 and onwards, those rules will apply into this environment, into the IVD industry. The impact of the upcoming IVDR, its implementation, will require a transformation of the entire diagnostics sector. Major changes will need to be made within the conformity assessment processes of IVDs, how these IVDs are built, how the design, production, and release activities need to be reinforced as per the regulation, and obviously how this will increase the timing to be considered from earlier stages of research at the final release on IVD for us to be able to put this IVD on the market. Specific tests for genetics, biology, molecular diagnostics, cancer detection, given the higher risk class of these IVDs will be more evaluated with more applicable rules, and these will be conducted by notified bodies, which we call the regulators in this case. It's obvious that diagnostic laboratories, testing platforms will be required to restructure the internal system, rebudget, and to plan and strategize how they can meet these requirements in a timely manner and according to their budgets. Specialized reference laboratories will need to provide their approach. They will need to develop their work according to CE market tests, according to European harmonized standards. It is clear there will be more cooperation between member states, health authority from European countries, including the European Commission within the IVD device coordination group, the laboratories themselves from a private or public practice, expert panels from notified bodies and IVD registers, including the legal manufacturers. It will be a more communication and more cooperation within these parties. As we have already demonstrated that for IVDs under the new regulation, we will need more clinical performance evidence. The lower risk, less strictness, the higher risk devices, they will apply the entire clauses within this regulation, and we will take obviously more time to generate these technical files. This is a key area where we need to emphasize and we need to be cautious on what is applicable, what timelines, expectations on legal manufacturing have to have at the time, either transitioning an IVD from the previous regulation in Europe up to the new IVDR regulation, or instead starting from scratch an IVDR submission. Once again, classification ruling, new economic operators, additional requirements on critical suppliers and subcontractors, either from production, manufacturing, raw material, testing laboratories. The involvement of a notified body in most of the cases, and the essential need of having a quality management system certified under 13485 standard. Obviously, this will be joined with the used or harmonized standards approved for the European Union. Thank you very much, and we will jump now into our Q&A session.
Okay, great. Thank you, Manuel. I would like Manuel to hop back on his video here, and we will begin the Q&A portion in just one moment. Alrighty, Manuel. Our first question here is, I believe you're still muted there.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning in some places. Thank you, Dylan. Our first topic we would like to address regarding the Q&A session was about the main steps to register our IVD under the UDAMET, the European IT database. And for this purpose, we have populated some comments and answers that we may help you to better understand this process. Can you please jump into the next slide, please? So we can see that the registration process is within the UDAMET is obviously an IT environment, whether the manufacturer will need to register in. But before stepping into the IVD UDAMET registration, we need to allocate what we call UDI numbers, Device Unique Identification Number. And for this purpose, this UDI has been set up within an international structure which compiles a number of items. For example, the product codes, what sort of industry environment this product is located within, the family of the device, and a number of items that compile this UDI number. It can vary from 8 to 15 numbers approximately. For the purpose of the UDI, which takes into account parameters like the GMDM codes or EMDM codes, these are allocated codes from international databases to a proper identified IVDs, and these codes are used by notified bodies or competent authorities for self-certified devices for us to provide them how our devices categorize, what sort of risk parameters need to be taken into account, what's the family of the device itself, what is the intended user, what sort of the scope, treatment or diagnosis our IVD is gonna fall in. So for the purpose of the UDI, as a common approach, most of the legal manufacturers used a UDI agency. This is an entity registered within the European Union, which is able to summarize and have the internal processes to be able to allocate UDI numbers. This needs the cooperation of the legal manufacturer. It will engage with this agency, and all these UDIs for the device hardware, for all the components, for any accessories that are considered fundamental within the IVD itself. So every single item will have a UDI. Once we have this process in place, all we will need to do is register our UDI numbers within the UDAMED database. The UDAMED database is still not operative as yet. The latest communication from the European Commission was it should be available right in May 2022. I hope this has provided some more lighting within your doubts about how to allocate UDIs and how to connect, obviously, with the UDAMED database. The next topic we wanted to address within the QA session was the new responsibilities allocated to the economic operators within the IVDR registration process. We have the role of the European representative, the role of the legal manufacturer, the role of the importer, and the role of the distributor. Next slide, please. For this purpose, obviously, the legal manufacturer is actually the company, the entity, the individual who is actually manufacturing and takes fully responsibility under his own name or trademark of this device, of the IVD device. While an importer, which needs to be designated as such, could be any natural or legal person established within the European Union, who would be the one placing the devices from outside the EU in the European market, in any country of the European market. Once we gain our IVDR registration, so we certified, if this legal manufacturer is not located within the European Union, it will need to appoint an importer. A company will be established already in the European Union and will take their rights to represent and place the devices within the member states. Exactly the same applies for the distributor, and this is a role which is obviously for any company or legal person who would be the supply chain for our device. Importer and distributor could be the same entity, and the authorized representative is another key one. So for this purpose, the European Union, the European Commission has appointed the role of an authorized representative for whether any legal manufacturer which is located outside of the European Union, we will need to align with this European representative company assembled in Europe, who will take the full responsibility of the outcome, the development, and the post-monitoring activities of this device on the market. Obviously, the EU representative, the authorized representative, will be fully synchronized with the legal manufacturer towards to keeping records of the technical files, keeping records of feedback, either negative or positive, complaints, any product recalls, adverse events, etc. Thank you.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Just one quick follow-up question to your first question. Could you elaborate on just what the latest is with the UDEMED module deadlines?
UDEMED will be fully operating since May 2022.
Okay, got it.
This is correct. It will be many companies, as they are already certified, and the IVDR will be able to operate under the UDEMED. And we need to understand that the UDEMED is just an automated IT process within the European Union, but all these registration has already UDI numbers. They are traceable, not only within Europe, but also within the other countries like United States, Canada, Asia Pacific countries like Australia, New Zealand. So this UDI that I mentioned before is a harmonized coding for all IVDs and medical devices as well. I believe, Dylan, there was probably, I believe, 2 or 3 questions within the chat. Maybe we should address those.
Yes, I do have 1 or 2 left here. So one that we received is the CE marking of general IVDs that are self-declared with the MHRA prior to Brexit, is that still valid in the EU, or they have to be self-declared again in the EU?
This is a very good question. So after the Brexit process and implementation, IVDs in the UK are ruled against different regulations. This is gone through what is called the UKCA, UK Competent Authority, and it's basically the previous IVDD regulation, the 9879 EC regulation. Obviously, for all the manufacturers which are registered within the UK under this regulation, to be able to market in Europe, they need to transition to IVDR. There won't be any acceptance of UK registered IVD devices in Europe without meeting the requirements of the IVDR. And that is applicable since May 2022. I hope
got it. Then one follow-up question to that would be, could you just expand on the impact of the UKCA marking requirements and how that might impact your process and plans moving forward?
The UKCA CE mark requirements are essentially the IVDD regulations. So for those companies who actually meet this regulation and want to adapt themselves and be able to market in Europe, they need to go through a transition process. Some of the UKCA ruled registered devices, and this is a good example for many manufacturers, are self-certified, meaning Class A IVD, because the requirements of the new MDR, IVDR regulation, the classification ruling may change, and then it won't be anymore. Some of these devices will step up to Class B or Class 3, which require a notified body. So for this transition process, any IVDD UKCA registered will need to follow exactly the same approach as we've been explaining through the presentation. They will need to do a gap assessment internally. They will need to present their technical file corrected and amended according to MDR requirements and structure. and they will need to be assessed against it, these requirements, either through a notified body for Class B, Class C, and Class D, and also Class A with sterilization or measuring purposes. And for self-certified, they will need to present the technical file under the IVDR requirements to the competent authority, either BfArM, the Health Minister of France, Netherlands, etc.
Got it. Thank you. I believe that just wraps up the Q&A portion. I wanted to quickly mention before we wrapped up that you can visit our website for a variety of resources, case studies, as well as more information about our services and capabilities. You can also explore our Celegence YouTube page for our webinar catalog. We've done about a dozen or so in the last year, all very relevant and with the industry at the moment. We have a webinar coming up next month about our Captis technology that we will be circulating the promotions for shortly. I know I mentioned our Captis IVDR and MDR technology at the beginning, but please join that for more information to see how our new compliance technology works for your technical documentation and literature search process. And finally, you can contact myself at the email address at the bottom of the screen for any information or any particular questions you might have. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be sending out a recording of this presentation with boosted audio as well as adjusted visuals as well, as I know there was a few technical difficulties. But that just about wraps us up here. And we'd like to thank everyone, especially Manuel for his help and the effort that he put in with this great presentation. But any final words, Manuel?
You are very welcome, Dylan. It's a pleasure to share this knowledge with you, and obviously Celegence is part of committing to the clients and the stakeholders, and any follow-up actions, any request, please address this to Dylan and also Celegence, and we will be happy to follow up on any additional questions, comments you may have. We're here to help, we're here to support. Thank you.
All righty. Thanks again, Manuel. I hope everyone has a great rest of their day, whether it's the morning, you got the day ahead of you, or you're wrapping up shortly. We wish you the best. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.